and feeling, with the artistic nature of one to whom suffering and sorrow were modes through which he could realize his conception of the beautiful, that an idea is of no value till it becomes incarnate and is made an image. He made of himself the image of the man of sorrows, and as such has fascinated and dominated art as no Greek god ever succeeded in doing. For the Greek gods, in spite of the white and red of their fair fleet limbs, were not really what they appeared to be. The curved brow of Apollo was like the sun's disk crescent over a hill at dawn, and his feet were as the wings of the morning. But he himself had been cruel to Marsyas, and had made Niobe childless. In the steel shields of Athena's eyes there had been no pity for Arachne. The pomp and peacocks of Hera were all that was really noble about her, and the father of the gods himself had been too fond of the daughters of men. The two most deeply suggestive figures of Greek mythology were, for religion, Demeter, an earth goddess, not one of the Olympians, and for art, Dionysus, the son of a mortal woman, to whom the movement of his birth had proved also the moment of her death. But life itself from its lowliest and most humble sphere produced one far more marvellous than the mother of Proserpina or the son of Semele. Out of the carpenter shop at Nazareth had come a personality infinitely greater than any made by myth and legend, and one, strangely enough, destined to reveal to the world the mystical meaning of wine and the real beauties of the lilies of the field as none, either on Cithaeron or at Enna, had ever done. The song of Isaiah, "He is despised and rejected of men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief, and we hid, as it were, our faces from him," had seemed to him to prefigure himself, and in him the prophecy was fulfilled. We must not be afraid of such a phrase. Every single work of art is in the fulfilment of a prophecy, for every work of art is the conversion of an idea into an image. Every single human being should be the fulfilment of a prophecy, for every human being should be the realization of some ideal, either in the mind of God or in the mind of man. Christ found the type and fixed it, and the dream of a Virgilian poet, either at Jerusalem or at Babylon, became in the long progress of the centuries incarnate in him for whom the world was waiting. To me, one of the things in history the most to be regretted is that the Christ's own Renaissance, which has produced the cathedral at Chartres, the Arthurian cycle of legends, the life of St. Francis of Assisi, the art of Giotto, and Dante's Divine Comedy, was not allowed to develop on its own lines, but it was interrupted and spoiled by the dreary classical Renaissance that gave us Petrarch and Raphael's frescoes and Palladian architecture and formal French tragedy and St. Paul's Cathedral and Pope's poetry and everything that is made from without and by dead rules and does not spring from within through some spirit informing it. But wherever there is a romantic movement in art, there is somehow, and under some form, is Christ or the soul of Christ. He is in Romeo and Juliet, in The Winter's Tale, in Provençal poetry, in The Ancient Mariner, in La Belle Dame sans Merci, and in Chatterton's Ballad of Charity. We owe to him the most diverse things and people, Hugo's Les Miserables, Baudelaire's Fleur de Mal, the note of pity in Russian novels, Verlaine and Verlaine's poems, the stained glass and tapestries and the Quattrocento work of Burne-Jones and Morris, belonging to him no less than the Tower of Giotto, Lancelot and Guinevere, Tannhauser, the troubled romantic marbles of Michelangelo, pointed architecture, and the love of children and flowers, for both of which, indeed, in classical art there was but little place, hardly enough for them to grow or play in, but which, from the 12th century down to our own day have been continually making their appearances in art under various modes and at various times, coming fitfully and wilfully as children as flowers are apt to do. Spring always seems to one as if the flowers had been in hiding, and only came out into the sun because they were afraid that grown-up people would grow tired of looking at them and give up the search. And the life of a child being no more than an April day on which there is both rain and sun for the Narcissus. It is the imaginative quality of Christ's own nature that makes him this palpitating centre of romance. The strange figures of poetic drama and ballad are made by the imagination of others, but out of his own imagination entirely did Jesus of Nazareth create himself. The cry of Isaiah had really no more to do with his coming than the song of the nightingale has to do with the rising of the moon. No more, though perhaps no less. He was the denial as well as the affirmation of prophecy. For every expectation that he fulfilled there is another that he destroyed. In all beauty, says Bacon, there is some strangeness of proportion, and of those who are born of the spirit of those, that is to say, who like himself are dynamic forces, Christ says that they are like the wind that bloweth where it listeth, and no man can tell whence it cometh and whither it goeth. That is why he is so fascinating to artists. He has all the colour elements of life: mystery, strangeness, pathos, suggestion, ecstasy, love. He appeals to the temper of wonder and creates that mood in which alone he can be understood. And to me it is a joy to remember that if he is of imagination all compact, the world itself is of the same substance. I said in Dorian Gray that the great sins of the world take place in the brain, but it is in the brain that everything takes place. We know now that we do not see with the eyes or hear with the ears. They are really channels for the transmission, adequate or inadequate, of sense impressions. It is in the brain that the poppy is red, that the apple is odorous, that the skylark sings. Of late I have been studying with diligence the 4 prose poems about Christ. At Christmas I managed to get a hold of a Greek Testament, and every morning, after I had cleaned my cell and polished my tins, I read a little of the Gospels, a dozen verses taken by chance anywhere. It is a delightful way of opening up the day. Everyone, even in a turbulent, ill-disciplined life, should do the same. Endless repetition, in and out of season, has spoiled for us the freshness, the naivete, the simple romantic charm of the Gospels. We hear them read far too often and far too badly, and all repetition is anti-spiritual. When one returns to the Greek, it is like going into a garden of lilies out of some narrow and dark house. And to me the pleasure is doubled by the reflection that it is extremely probable that we have the actual terms, the ipsissima verba, used by Christ. It was always supposed that Christ talked in Aramaic. Even Renan thought so. But now we know that the Galilean peasants, like the Irish peasants of our own day, were bilingual, and that Greek was the ordinary language of intercourse all over Palestine, as indeed all over the Eastern world. I never liked the idea that we knew of Christ's own words only through a translation of a translation. It is a delight to me to think that as far as his conversation was concerned, Charmides might have listened to him, and Socrates reasoned with him, and Plato understood him, that he really said, ego eimi aquamen akalos, that when he thought of the lilies of the field, and how they neither toil nor spin, his absolute expression was katamafatet takrina tuhagru hausaksani ukopia udanade, and that his last word when he cried out, my life has been completed, has reached its fulfillment, has been perfected, was exactly as St. John tells us it was, tetelestai, no more. While in reading the Gospels, particularly that of St. John himself, or whatever early Gnostic took his name and mantle, I see the continual assertion of the imagination as the basis of all spiritual and material life. I see also that to Christ imagination was simply a form of love, and that to him love was Lord in the fullest meaning of the phrase.